Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to talk about the latest reveal from none other than Kuro Games themselves, because they've got quite the news bomb when it comes to Project Nami, their new action online multiplayer game. Yes, you heard that right, folks. Kuro Games is coming out with something that many are assuming is competitive, one that many are assuming is going to be like a PvP sort of game mode, and it is going to be something that's developed on Unreal Engine 5. And guess what? They've even got a graphic to go along with it. So yeah, thanks to Narushio for getting some of this stuff linked and, of course, doing some of the translations as well. This is definitely something that a lot of people have been looking forward to. Kuro Games continuing to pad out their portfolio, given how they've taken a lot of existing genres of games and, you know, in a lot of ways, done them better. They started off with Honkai Impact 3rd and PGR, and now they've got Genshin Impact and Wuthering Waves. And this game, even with the limited news that we've heard about it and some of the details, I think we can have some clues as to what types of genres Kuro's going to be lifting from to create this potential masterpiece. And so, just for some context, we've covered this whole situation before in a prior video on the channel about 2 weeks ago, looking at some of the job descriptions. So I just wanted to make sure that some of the initial assumptions that we've had are actually rectified. One of the main things that we talked about over here was that this was going to be a potential MMO RPG or an MMO ARPG, and it turns out that some of those initial claims or some of those initial speculations, just from looking at some of the job descriptions, those might not actually be correct, even though you're clearly seeing stuff like 3D and MMO. We drew relations to games like Lost Ark, like Diablo, like Path of Exile's potential inspirations, but it turns out that might not be what it actually is. So let's go ahead and get right on into some of the exact details about this project. So when it comes to Project Nami, this is the era of machines and magic. It's an original IP. Bare gears, rune-covered armor, giant war machines powered by energy, shattered mountains, sunken lands, magic cannot escape the coming darkness. And when she raises the banner of resistance, the light of flames will shine on the fallen heroes in the ruins. And so you might not have a lot of clues from that. That could also be poorly translated as well. But this kind of sounds like a bit of like a hero battler to me, where you're gonna have like two sides who are maybe like continuously resurrected, and you know, they're fighting in some sort of like push and pull tug of war thing going on. And there are tons of games that fit that genre. But before I start showing some of the examples of what might actually be here, let's continue reading to hear some of the more unique characteristics about the game. This is the era of extraordinary heroes. Unique characters. They have distinctive personalities, different shapes, that's an interesting word to use, and unique three-dimensional fighting and mobility styles. They are attracted to each other and gradually gather together to overthrow the powers that be. So that should give us a couple of clues. Mainly this line over here, three-dimensional fighting and mobility styles. And if you know what the word three-dimensional means in the context of video games, then that's why it probably doesn't make a ton of sense for the game to be something like a 2D isometric ARPG, which is essentially what games like Diablo 4, Lost Ark, so on and so forth actually are. These are essentially 2D games. I know that might throw some people off. Yes, the graphics are 3D, but the gameplay is 2D. And so an ARPG right off the bat is kind of something that's been eliminated. And in the same vein, I would assume that a game like League of Legends, which frankly is also actually a 2D game as well. I know they have like knockups and stuff and like a Z-axis, but it's, you know what I'm talking about over here. This is probably something that's not on the table as well. And this is the thing. I see some people in here saying, oh, this is not going to be Unreal Engine 5 because it's going to be available on mobile. One thing for certain is that, yes, this game is going to be available on mobile, but there are some games that are releasing on Unreal Engine 5 that are also on mobile. So I imagine that, well, this game might have a lot of time to do, or a lot of time to spend on the optimization piece. We'll just have to see. But one thing for certain about a MOBA style game or an arena style game, which is what this is sounding like, is that you don't actually need to do that much graphically, right? One of the things about Unreal Engine and its performance is that when you have a much bigger game world to actually render, which is, you know, what you see in Wuthering Waves over here, this little section for Septimont, that's a lot different from a smaller, more contained map that you might find in another type of game. So yeah, this being in Unreal Engine 5, I wouldn't read too much into it because it's naturally, from what it sounds like it's going to be a bit smaller in scope, at least in terms of map size. A little bit smaller because there just isn't as much to load in terms of those assets. So now let's go ahead and keep reading. This is the era of passionate warfare, multiplayer action combat. Devote yourself to a mission greater than yourself, team up to fight strong enemies, face death together, and return to battle again and again. In the end, face a fated showdown. So as you're seeing over here, this really sounds like one of those instanced sort of games where you're playing for maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes at a time. You're fighting against another team. Maybe there's going to be some PvE, some co-op game modes, but you're repeatedly going to, I guess from hearing this, you're repeatedly going to die, you're going to respawn and have that sort of system going, and then probably have differing encounters, level ups, so on and so forth every single game. And now this is the piece over here that could raise some questions, but then also answer them. We've gotten the context, right? That this is going to be an original IP. It's going to have like hero units, characters with a lot of abilities, a lot of skills in 3D combat. And it's also going to be multiplayer action, and you're going to fight against each other, respawn, keep score maybe, and have that sort of stuff. The last piece is progression and development. Battle to battle, defeat enemies, collect equipment, comprehend the richly varied skills, and awaken the branch of battle specialization. So it sounds like this is going to have a lot of like emergent gameplay where you'll go in, you'll customize items, you'll customize builds, you'll have a lot of different ways to approach combat and maybe like the design of characters, and you know, buy the right items that enable certain sorts of play styles, and then get the right upgrades that further reinforce those play styles. Sounds a lot like a different combination of a lot of games. It sounds like we have almost like the item system, like the talent system, right, of your League of Legends, where you go in, you get your resources, you purchase items, do all that, so on and so forth. It looks like it might have the gameplay elements of titles like Naraka Blade Point, where you're going in, you're collecting items in here as well, but this is more like a battle royale with a really big map. And so that whole inventory management piece, all of that, I don't know if that's something that's going to jive and make a lot of sense for a game that's also going to be on mobile with, like, you know, that whole crazy interface. But at least in terms of like the combat and the movement, right? Maybe this is something that we'll see over here, because a game like this is what reminds me the most of what actually exists in Wuthering Waves and PGR currently, right? 3D graphics, bit of an X and Y axis, more so in Wuthering Waves. And then from there, right, kind of like that movement, all of that. However, there could also be another title that this is similar to, and some of you might be familiar with this one. And of course, right, this is like Warframe. This is where you like run and dash around. You also have abilities. You don't really have items as much in this game, not ones that you like dynamically equip in combat. But this could be the idea that Project Nami has like a base. You like continually upgrade your character, and then you send them out on missions. While in games like Naraka, while in games like League of Legends, you kind of start from more of like an equal baseline every single game and then compete against other players. While in Warframe, right, you're going ahead, you're building up that inventory and stuff over time. There's also, well, the idea of Smite, or kind of like a MOBA that has now turned into like a 3D third person sort of deal. And this could definitely be something that Kuro Games decides to go with, but I'm not particularly sure about it. Maybe if they start incorporating like 3D elements into gameplay like this is something that they could go for. But right now, I would say Smite is kind of like the big example of this type of game, and it's a little bit clunky. It's got like a bit of a, you know, a bit of an odd feel to it. Imagine maybe if we had like the gameplay and like the whole like tower base defense sort of deal from Smite, and then perhaps the gameplay of something like Marvel Rivals, where this is like fully 3D. This has like the whole like vertical climbing, the flying, all of that. Imagine Marvel Rivals gameplay in kind of like the setting of Smite. That could be really interesting with all the flying. And I do think, right, Because Smite has like that item system, that gold system. You go back, you upgrade your characters, you purchase equipment to, to work with the playstyle. That's something that's in there as well. So people are throwing out a bunch of other names as well. I think there's Deadlock. I think there's Paladins. I personally am not that experienced with Deadlock, and I don't think a lot of people are because that shit hasn't been released yet. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking right off of the bat. And one thing is for certain when it comes to Kuro's track record in, just creating games as a whole, they commonly look at what the biggest problems are in the games that they're adapting. They improve upon them. And then, of course, right after the game releases, they continue to make more and more and more quality of life updates. And I think one thing you really need to be when it comes to a competitive multiplayer game is that you need to be an extremely responsive developer. Because when it comes to PvP, when it comes to, player versus player combat, you have to actively balance the game. You have to balance it well, and you need to be able to keep your pulse on what the community is thinking in regards to how strong certain units are, how strong certain items are, how strong certain strategies are, and then go ahead, right? And then make sure that people are actually having a good experience in game. And that's something that people are always saying is a negative in a lot of these sort of like PvP oriented games, is bad balancing by the developers. And the thing is, well, since Kuro Games literally also has a track record of going out and even balancing things, right? Making the experience better in their single player games, where you don't really have to do as much of it, especially in a title like Gacha. I have high faith, I have high hopes for the future ahead for this one. I would also say one important thing to look at over here is that it is not explicitly mentioned that Project Nami is a gacha game. And this is how I think the system will work. If Project Nami launches, it's sort of like this PvP competitive game. I don't think the characters themselves are necessarily going to be gacha. I think in a competitive PvP game, it is really, really, really rough. It's really, really, really bad to have character acquisition be locked to the gacha and a lot of pulls. The ways that these games typically monetize their titles is through skins. And I think the best example of this is League of Legends. Let's just take a look at this over here. Yeah, they've got 1,800 skins in the game. That's how they monetize, by the way. You see that over here? Showing 19 to 36 of 1860 skins. And so the game itself requires you to grind in-game resources, in-game currency to unlock all the different characters. Other games like Marvel Rivals just go ahead and have skins and they give out every single character for free. We'll just have to see, if Project Nami is this sort of game, how the monetization is going to go, because I would heavily prefer the system where you're able to get every single character for free, or maybe you have to do a light bit of playing to actually unlock them. And on the flip side, to monetize and actually create money, they create just a bunch of nice skins that people want to use, and then people spend money on the skins. And that's kind of like how the game keeps the cash flowing in, because this sort of free-to-play model is just inherently what works the best for this type of competitive game. And my point of view is that if this game launches with a gacha for the characters, and in order to play the characters and then, compete with other players who might have the character, is to like pay or grind that much, I think it's not going to be good. But I think Kuro's done their research. I think they've seen all the different monetization strategies for this type of game, and for this type of genre, and they're probably going to make the right decision in regards to this. And don't worry, if they fall short, if they fuck up, if they go ahead and they completely butcher what the monetization of this game potentially could be, and then fail to live up to what other developers have done to, straight up just make it better as a whole, don't worry, I'll be one of the first people to talk about it. But for now, I don't think that these devs have done anything to warrant an unnecessary level of suspicion. And in that same vein, if Hoyo was making a game like this, I'd be skeptical as fuck. I would be skeptical as hell, because I don't think that company even knows how to make good skins. So how would they even work with a model like this? Yeah, I wouldn't trust Hoyo with a fucking MMO ARPG battler of any kind, because they can't make good skins. They're fucking trash. They're awful. And so that's probably why they haven't made one yet, because they wouldn't know how to monetize that game. But Kuro, just look at PGR. They know how to make good skins. And of course, look at Wuthering Ways as well. They know how to make good skins there too. So I've got full faith in this bad boy. We'll just be waiting for more and more details as this comes out. But I gotta say, just from these taglines alone, right? Project Nami, Action Multiplayer Online, UE5, and the scope of the game. I think that there's a lot for us to be excited about. So yeah, that'll be that. That'll be the coverage. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if my suspicions are too crazy. I'll see you all next time. Peace.